The Severe Weather Network Livingston County partners with community organizations, service agencies, and faith communities to provide emergency overnight refuge during the winter months for people affected by homelessness, while connecting individuals to community action agencies committed to providing the services necessary to assist homeless individuals with the transition into affordable housing. The Severe Weather Network was created 5 years ago due to the fact the only means of shelter available to homeless adult men and women was a very limited number of motel nights funded through local nonprofit agencies. Agency funds for the motel voucher program were depleted by early January, leaving homeless men and women with no means for emergency shelter in Livingston County throughout the winter months. The Severe Weather Network has served 85 guests, transitioned into stable housing 10 guests, and saved local nonprofit agencies $130,000, allowing agencies to reinvest those dollars in programs to support the needs of our community. The Severe Weather Network is governed by a board of directors. The Severe Weather Center is operated by community volunteers under the direction of a program coordinator. The Severe Weather Center is open December 1st through April 19th from 6 p.m. through 7 a.m., including weekends and holidays. So why do we ask our volunteers to do training? The policies, procedures, and rules for the Severe Weather Network and the Severe Weather Center are a direct result of volunteer and guest feedback, as well as operational experience. Volunteer training ensures 3 things. Number 1, consistency throughout the program. Number 2, safety of staff, volunteers, and guests. And number 3, equips the volunteers with the tools necessary for a positive, rewarding, and impactful experience. With a nightly rotation of volunteers at the Severe Weather Center, it is essential all volunteers are following the procedures outlined in the Severe Weather Center manual and communicated through the Severe Weather Network training program. Today's training will focus on the following key objectives. Number 1, homelessness in Livingston County. Number 2, the intake registration process. Number 3, safety and security. And number 4, the Severe Weather Center policies and procedures.
A key partner for the Severe Weather Network is the Oakland Livingston Human Services Agencies, which we refer to as OLSA. OLSA is a community action agency that has been in place for over 50 years. They work with individuals and families, empowering people to succeed. They also work at the community level on issues like affordable housing. OLSA, like the Severe Weather Network, has a shared vision of using compassion to bring hope, which leads to freedom and independence. OLSA has dedicated staff who work with individuals in various stages of homelessness. OLSA, for the Severe Weather Network, is the intake or the access point. They are the central hub. They point individuals to resources who are transitioning into housing.
Here are 4 facts about poverty. 1, poor individuals are more likely to die younger. 2, at the macro level, the economy suffers and we see the standard of living start to decrease across our country. 3, poverty has a serious social and political consequence. It can provoke disorder and crime. It reduces the public's confidence in democracy. It is the breakdown of hope, freedom, and independence that we are trying to rebuild. And 4, the faith-based community carries out the responsibility of meeting the needs of society's most unfortunate.
4 myths about poverty. Number 1, poverty is more likely to occur with inner city minorities. The fact is, although African Americans are overrepresented among the poor, they make up only about 1/4 of the poverty population in our country. Myth number 2, people in poverty don't work. The fact is, nearly half of the individuals in poverty that are of working age work at least part-time. Myth number 3, the poor are always with us. The fact is, historically, people's view of what it means to be poor has varied. The majority of Americans do experience poverty at some point in their lifetime. Myth number 4, Data shows that growth in poverty is among single female-headed households. Therefore, it must somehow be related to family structure. The fact is, more trends show that poverty is related to economics.
We define homelessness at a couple different levels. First, there's literal homelessness, which is living in a situation not suitable for humans, such as living in a car. These people may suffer from mental, physical, or cognitive disabilities. Secondly, there's doubled up, when someone loses their home and they move in with someone who is not homeless. So basically, two households in one home. The statistics are approximately 50% literally homeless and 50% of the people are doubled up. Those most likely to become literally homeless are those who are doubled up. While the Severe Weather Network is sheltering those who are literally homeless, OLSA is able to work with those who are doubled up to avoid having those individuals slip into literal homelessness.
Many who are homeless and literally homeless in Livingston County find themselves in this state for the very first time. So we need to be mindful that we may not only be dealing with some of the disabilities mentioned earlier, like mental health or physical or cognitive functioning disabilities, but we may also experience someone who is feeling trauma by experiencing homelessness for the very first time.
Here are a few facts about homelessness. We have had an overall decrease in the number of homeless individuals in Livingston County. This is about a 15% drop from 2016 to 2017. In 2016, we had around 1,000 homeless individuals, and in 2017, we had 843. There is an even split among homeless in males and females. Homelessness follows poverty, which follows unemployment. Hospitals are seeing more newborns born into homelessness, and we have seen an increase up to age 4 entering homelessness. A majority of our homeless individuals have a high school degree, and most have some college. Whether literally homeless or doubled up, there is a growing trend for those who owned a home in their lifetime and then lost it to foreclosure or other circumstances.
Let's revert back to when we were 5, 6, 7 years old. How many remember thinking at that time what they wanted to do with their life, what they wanted to be? Whether it be, a pastor, a fireman, a teacher, a lawyer, whatever it might be. You dreamt about doing something with yourself at that point in time. Quick show of hands, how many people thought about being homeless or aspired to be homeless? Or have an addiction problem, or maybe a mental issue. The reality is none of us did. It's not something that we aspired to do. Unfortunately, the circumstances that brought Terry here today and took her into the situation that she was were somewhat beyond her control. Okay, that wasn't what she wanted to do. And unfortunately, with the 800 plus people that are currently homeless in the county, that's the same thing that exists with them. They don't want to be there, but unfortunately, whatever circumstances have led them to that particular time, thrust them in the situation that they're in. So by virtue of that, what we're going to talk about today is if you happen to find yourself in a situation while working at one of the centers where somebody is maybe not acting normally, maybe is at an increased level of anxiety, they're in clearly a crisis situation with themselves and maybe exerting that amongst other people, to try to give you some tools to try to bring them down and try to de-escalate that situation. Did any of you folks work last year in the centers last year? The common occurrence for this to happen is probably very low. Okay, in fact, I'm not sure that we had one last year. Is that true? Did we have any? I'm sorry? A very minor one. So the reality is I don't anticipate this happening, but in the event that it does, we're going to try to give you some opportunities and some tools to use to try to de-escalate some of that situation. Now, a little bit about myself. I'm a deputy, obviously, with the Sheriff's Department here in Livingston County. As part of my duties working the road, I'm also a hostage negotiator. I'm a CIT instructor, which is a crisis intervention technique or training instructor. I'm a driving instructor, a field training instructor as well. And I've been through a lot of training with respect to this, with de-escalation, for using verbal judo, for lack of a better term, to try to help the situations out. Ray's been with the department for 18 years. He's currently a community resource officer, member of our SWAT team, field training officer as well. He's had a vast amount of experience in dealing with this as well. And there's some of the things that I will tell you from our own experiences. The things that we're going to give you today work. They work, okay? Is it the end-all be-all? Absolutely not, because nothing is. This program is about a 40-hour program. It's a week-long program, and we're going to condense it into about 30 minutes, okay? It was started in 1988 by Memphis Police Department after an officer-involved shooting with a mentally impaired man. And their department came to them and said, we've had a high number of incidents where not only our officers are getting hurt, but the public or the people that we're dealing with are getting hurt. So they launched this program. The year after this started, they saw a decrease in officer injury rates of 85% and a 50% reduction in injury rates with the folks that they were dealing with. So it did work, and it captured their attention, and it started to produce the model that we're currently using right now. So again, it's a thumbnail sketch of what it is that we go through, but the one thing that is present, and one thing that I do know, is that it definitely does work. Now, when you first found out that both Ray and I were police officers and we were staying here, there was a stigma that was probably associated with all of us, correct? Whatever that may be. Whether a fair assessment with police officers, you've had a bad experience with them, whatever it might be, there's certainly a stigma that's associated with he and I based upon what we do for a living. Same thing exists with folks who are homeless, okay? First thing you think of, if I said a homeless person, in my mind is some person pushing a shopping cart down the street with all their worldly belongings inside of that, and disheveled, dirty, whatever that might be. That's my stigma, okay? You may have your own. But the idea is that we don't want to try to stigmatize them, because the reality is, as I stated earlier, the fact of the matter is they're just people. Just like Terry. She's a person who never aspired to be in the situation she was in. She's worked diligently to get her out of that situation, and I commend her for that. It took a lot of hard work, but the reality is she's a human being. She's a human being that didn't want to be where she was. So try not to stigmatize them in terms of, well, they're uneducated, they're this, they're that, whatever it might be, because the fact is that the stigma that you may have is probably not accurate, okay? If you happen to get yourself in a situation where somebody walks into one of the warming centers or one of the centers that you currently are at and are working, and you can tell immediately that they are at a heightened sense of anxiety. They are truly in a crisis at that point in time. They're in a crisis by virtue of the fact that they don't have anywhere else to go. And that in and of itself is daunting. They may have other issues that are on board that maybe is ramping that crisis up. Maybe they're intoxicated. Maybe they do have a drug addiction problem. Maybe they do have a mental illness that's not being treated accurately or properly. Oftentimes, folks who are in the situations that are in right now self-medicate because they don't have the medical resources in order to have insurance, proper medication. So they self-medicate. And you may encounter some of these folks. You may encounter some of these folks that are at a heightened level of stress by virtue of the fact that they don't have anywhere else to go. So they're coming to you for help. They're coming to you because you're the last alternative. If you encounter something like that, and Terry, I was going to touch on this even if she didn't. She had talked about your ears. I've always been a proponent of we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That's frankly because we should listen twice as much as we talk. Obviously, I'm doing all the talking. I'm not listening at all right now, but but the reality is that her message about talking or about listening is absolutely accurate, okay? And some of the skills that we're going to give you when somebody does come in who is in a crisis, who is amped up, whatever the case may be, We use a term called active listening skills. And by virtue of doing that, and some of the techniques that we're going to give you are going to allow you to try to connect with that person, to try to get them from wherever they are up here down to here. Your voice can do that, your tone, your posture, simple nods, and reflecting back to them what it is that they're talking about, talking to you about, is going to hopefully create that bond. Hopefully it's going to create that connection that's going to allow them to trust you a little bit and bring them down to a level that you can actually start to talk to them. Okay? I know there's a policy that states with respect to intoxication levels, if they are under the influence of alcohol, they are not allowed to stay, correct? So that hasn't changed from last year. So if you believe that you have somebody who is impaired, maybe under the influence, my suggestion is get with one of the facilitators who are there, explain to them what the situation is, and you can quietly discuss this with the person there. As opposed to making it a big deal with them and making it a scene, we're going to do it in a quiet area. They know the rules prior to walking in, so it's not going to be a surprise to them when they're told that they can't stay there for the evening, but we can make alternative arrangements. There's also typically a stigma with folks who have mental illnesses that they are at a higher level of promoting violence as opposed to being the victim of violence. And in the reality, people who have mental illnesses are more often the victim than they are the predator, okay? So if you do have somebody who has walked in and there's a discernible mental illness that may be present, don't necessarily think that you're going to become the victim of a violent act, because that's just not the case, okay? It's not the case that exists. Some of the tools that we're going to talk about with respect to de-escalation, some of the active listening skills that we had talked about. The biggest thing with this, in all of you who are going to volunteer, your safety is paramount to anything and everything else. Okay, I'm going to state that right up in the front. If you believe that whatever situation you may be in is going to escalate to a spot where you may become injured, somebody else may become injured, it's time to eject, it's time to get on the phone with 911 and start to get us involved, okay? You're not trained properly enough to handle it. You can try to de-escalate it if you can, but if it crosses that threshold where you think it's going to become violent, it's time to eject and get on the phone with us immediately, okay? So again, your safety is paramount to anything and everything else that you're going to do. The first thing that you want to do if you have somebody who is in a heightened sense of awareness, heightened sense of anxiety level, whatever it might be, is to try to remain calm, okay? Your breathing is going to help you remain calm, okay? Be patient. Patience is a key. If you've got somebody who is willing to talk, allow them to talk, okay? Let them talk. You've got all night. They've got all night. So patience is going to be a huge component of it. Be empathetic versus sympathetic, okay? And part of doing that is when somebody is talking to you and they're starting to say, you ask them a simple question, well, how are things going? And they start going off that, well, my wife has left me, my home has been foreclosed, I don't have a job, I haven't eaten in 6 months, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm at my wit's end. And as opposed to just saying, yeah, well, do you need, is there anything I can get for you? Reflecting back to them, or maybe paraphrasing back to them what they have just simply stated to you. So you sound pretty angry right now. And you're telling me that you haven't eaten in quite a while. Your wife has left you. You haven't worked. I feel for you. Instantly, they are going to start to believe that, wait a minute, this person actually just listened to what I said to them. They heard what I said, they paraphrased it back to me, and now, as opposed to thinking that they're just talking to somebody who doesn't care, this person truly does care. They care about what it is that I'm saying. They care about, maybe there's going to start to be a trust that starts to happen. That's part of the active listening skills that we employ significantly and often. You don't have to do it with everything that they say, but periodically repeat back to them or paraphrase back to them what it is that they've just told you. It's going to go a long way in starting to build that bond that happens with you and that person. They're going to start to really reach out, and they're going to start to talk to you a little bit more. They're going to start to trust that you actually do believe what you're here for the right reason. Understand that your nonverbal cues and your verbal cues are a huge component of communication. If you're talking or they're talking to you, you kind of got your arms crossed, you're not necessarily looking at them in the eye, kind of looking off, seemingly disinterested, they're going to pick that up. Your nonverbal cues make up of 60 to 65% of communication, which is obviously more than our verbal communication skills. So watch what you do, how you do it, what you give back to them, and what they're picking up on you. Treat them with respect. Respect is a huge component. And again, oftentimes these folks haven't been able to speak to somebody who truly does care. They want, more than anything, they just want a voice. They want to be heard. And as she said earlier, our ears play such a huge component of this. They just want to talk. By virtue of doing some of these things, it's going to allow you to control the situation without them even knowing that you're controlling it. If they're up here again at a level that they're ramped up, they're anxious, they're screaming, maybe they're tired, talking to them in a voice that matches their volume level is not going to help. Because all we're trying to do is we're going to start to talk over the top of each other. I always talk usually a couple ticks below their volume level. And I continue to do that. And I'll even continue to start talking softer. And what I'm doing without them even knowing is that I'm walking them down a set of stairs to control their volume without telling them, calm down, relax. Nobody wants to hear that, okay? But I'm doing it psychologically that they don't even know. By doing that, if you've got a situation or a person who's up here with a volume level and you walk them down here, you've already de-escalated it halfway. And they don't even know that you're doing it. As I stated earlier, when you have folks who are at this level, asking them open-ended questions to get them to talk is key. It's beneficial. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're feeling? As opposed to saying, you don't feel that good, do you? Nope. But by asking them an open-ended question to elicit a response, it's going to be more than one or two words. Again, oftentimes they just want to talk. They want to share their story. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. You don't necessarily have to understand what they're going through, because it's, other than Terry, I know I have never been homeless. So I can't honestly say that I understand how she feels. I could try to put myself in that situation, but ultimately I can't, because I've never been there. Again, your body language, your tone of voice, your positioning of where your body is with respect to them. You don't have to necessarily be up on top of them, but creating a space between the two of you. Prior to doing anything with them, you see that they become emotional, you see that they become crying, and you're one of those people that want to be sympathetic and empathetic with them and touch them or give them a hug. Prior to doing so, ask them if it's okay. Before you do something, explain what you're going to do and the reasons behind it. If I'm going to put handcuffs on Ray, and he's at a heightened sense of anxiety or whatever the case may be, and I've started to walk him down, and I just go ahead and grab onto his hands, put handcuffs on him, he might get amped up again. But if I explain to him what I'm going to do and the reasons why I have to do it, he's not surprised by the actions that I'm going to take. Okay? Listen with all your senses: eyes, hearing, your mouth, your body language, what you do, how you do it. When I talk, and normally trust me, right now, I feel trapped right now because I know this camera's on me. I'm usually a wanderer. I usually like to wander back and forth. But that's part of how I communicate. It eases me, it comforts me. If people want to walk around a little bit and pace, allow them to do so. Don't trap them. Allow them to do what is going to be most natural for them. Allow them to do what's going to be most comfortable for them. Again, a lot of these folks just truly want to, they just want to be heard. They want to be respected, and respect is a huge component with them. It's ultimately one of those things that at this time in their life, in this crisis that they're in, it's about the only thing that they have. It's about the only thing that they can possess. And if they can gain your respect, that's going to be one tick up the ladder that's going to hopefully help them. Okay? I don't know where I'm at in terms of time. I don't want to go exceedingly further. I know that Ray is chomping at the bit to get involved, which is fine because he does a very good job of this. The one thing that I will say earlier, and I failed to mention this, DJ was extremely excited about this being videotaped, and the reality is that all of the folks who presented prior to us have faces for TV. Ray and I have faces for radio. Okay, so yeah, I know. So this is abnormal for us. Okay, and then in addition to that, I'm certainly not a public speaker, and I don't do this on a daily basis. So this is not. We're somewhat out of our comfort levels. Ray is going to build off of some of the things that I talked about and or add to. If you do have questions when we're done with this, by all means, please do ask. Again, this is not the end-all, be-all. It's not the magic elixir to solve the world's problems, but it is a tool that might be beneficial should you get yourself into a situation that, you have somebody who's exhibiting a lot of different signs, okay? I hope it doesn't happen, but again, your safety is paramount to anything and everything else. And if you feel like you need to give us a call, call us. The worst thing that happens is that we come out, situation resolves itself, and we move on. Best case scenario for us. We'll do that all night long. Okay?
The Severe Weather Center will be located at Chilson Hills for the entire season from December 1 through April 19th. Partner churches and organizations will cover the center for typically a one-week period. There are several positions that need to be filled for each one-week period in order for the center to run smoothly. The nightly positions are as follows.
The partner team coordinator organizes the volunteers for the week that their church or organization is covering the center. They recruit volunteers in advance to ensure that they have proper coverage. The partner team coordinator is on site nightly from 5:30 to 10 p.m.
Registration host is responsible for the check-in of the guests and is at the center from 5:30 to 9 p.m.
Food preparation volunteers provide meals for the center. They drop off food items and they depart before the guests arrive. They do not need to go through the training course because they do not have interaction with the guests.
Meal servers are at the center from 6 to 10 p.m. They set up for dinner, sit with guests during dinner, and clean up after. They remain at the center until 10 o'clock when overnight chaperones have arrived and have completed their on-site training.
Overnight chaperones arrive at 9:45 and spend the night at the facility, departing at 7:15 a.m.
Laundry volunteers pick up the laundry at a designated location after 8 a.m. and return the clean laundry the same day by 5 p.m.
At 6 p.m., the guests arrive. We are required by our insurance company to contract and provide transportation for our guests. Volunteers are not permitted to transport the guests. Guests may arrive between 6 and 10 p.m. and possibly later if they are working. You will be made aware of those guests who are allowed to arrive after 10 p.m. for work purposes.
At check-in, the registration host should review the OLSA registration list to ensure the guest name is on the list. If they have not yet stayed at the center, they must fill out 3 forms: a guest registration form, guest liability form, and guest expectation form. If they have stayed at the center before, you will enter their name onto the computer at the registration desk. At that time, you will also record their transportation needs for the following day, morning and evening transportation to and from the center. The transportation coordinator will have access to the computerized check-in. It is important to ensure that the check-in form on the computer is completely and properly filled out for each guest.
Ask the guest to allow you to view the contents of their bags, checking for items that are not allowed at the center, such as alcohol, drugs, or weapons. Each guest will be assigned a bin to hold their belongings for the evening. Let them place their belongings in the bin, ensure that the bin is closed tightly, and store it back in the storage location behind the check-in area. The registration host is available until 9 p.m. in the event a guest needs to have their bin retrieved to use a needed item. The bin is then returned for storage for the remainder of the evening.
If the guest is new to the facility, provide them with a tour of the facility. Show them the sleeping arrangements, the bathroom location, etc. Make them feel welcome, comfortable, and dignified. When the guests register for the Severe Weather Network through OLSA, they are provided with a list of rules, unless they are brought to us through emergency transportation, such as law enforcement. In that situation, they must fill out an emergency intake form, which is located at the registration desk. Please remind them that they need to contact OLSA the following day to ensure they complete the proper intake procedures. If it's on a weekend, remind them that they will need to do that on Monday. Copies of all intake forms are located in the back of your Severe Weather Network manual.
Between 6 and 6:30 p.m., dinner is set up by meal servers who are invited to have dinner with the guests and share conversation and fellowship. You will find it very easy to share compassion and hope with our guests who are very appreciative of the time and effort you put forth to provide this service to them.
At 9:45 p.m., the overnight chaperones arrive. They are given a brief tour of the facility by the team coordinator. We must ensure that at least one overnight chaperone is awake at all times. You may sleep in shifts. The reason we must have a person awake at all times is if a situation arises, our staff is aware. For example, we have had medical issues arise during the night. We have also had an individual leave the center during the night. In the event of an emergency, we need to know exactly how many guests are staying at the center for emergency responders. We have never had this situation occur, but must always be prepared with an accurate count. We also ask that at least one male and one female overnight chaperone serve at the facility each night.
The team coordinator departs the center after the overnight shift is in place. Remember, the team coordinator is on call and should be notified of any situations that arise during the night. If it is a simple situation that can be handled by the overnight staff, please ensure that the team coordinator is notified first thing in the morning. The phone numbers of the team coordinator, program coordinator, and board members are available at the registration desk.
At 6 a.m., please ensure that all guests are aware that it's wake-up time. Usually we just knock on the doors. Make coffee and set out the light breakfast items, provide guests with bus tokens, or send them up for their ride. Pull their bins if they wish to take some of their personal items out of the center for the day. Guests need to depart by 7 a.m., either by transportation provided by us, or they depart in their own automobile by 7 a.m. From 7 to 7:15, overnight chaperones complete a nightly log entry on the computer at the registration desk, including concerns, illnesses, or anything else that you feel should be reported. List any supplies that may be needed, wipe down the counters in the kitchen and the bathrooms, and take the laundry in the designated laundry bags to the drop-off point if necessary. Turn down the heat to the marked temperature and shut off all the lights. Contact the team coordinator through text when you leave to ensure that they're aware that the night is complete and that they are made aware of any circumstances that might have arisen.
And now some important policies and procedures. We have zero tolerance for drugs, alcohol, verbal or physical aggression, profanity, weapons, pornography. If any violations occur, please take the guest aside and discuss the situation. If the situation escalates to the point where we need to ask them to leave the facility and they don't have transportation, we can make arrangements for a cab to take that person to a family or friend. Please check with the program coordinator before making any decisions. If the situation escalates to the point where staff or guests feel threatened, don't hesitate to call 911.
If there is an illness or an emergency situation, please contact 911. Also, contact the team coordinator, who must also contact the program director or board member. It is imperative that an incident report be filled out whenever an emergency event occurs.
Please remember, we do not permit pets unless they are certified service animals, and the paperwork must be disclosed and provided. If a guest leaves the center, they must sign out and are not permitted to return the same night, unless it is a medical situation and they are returning from urgent care. There is an outdoor smoking area with a container for cigarette butts. No marijuana smoking is permitted. Legal documents must be provided if medical marijuana is required. We do not dispense any medication.